As Vanessa mentioned earlier this morning, this is the third year that we are collaborating with the team on the survey, and it was a real pleasure analyzing the results of this year's report. For anyone who might have joined Gender Networks in the last year, this is something that we do on an annual basis, and it's really to get a better understanding of some of your strategic objectives, your budgets, the events and initiatives you've run over the course of the last year, but also your priorities in the next 12 months. I think often we can be guilty of working in silos or bubbles within our own organization. So it's really good to kind of step outside of that space and really get some insights and best practice from organizations outside of our sector. Now, historically with this report, we have included sections around the structure of your network, the use of technology, how you've really engaged with your male colleagues and allies, as well as your role as network chair or co-chair. This year was a particularly exceptional year, so we have added in a new section really looking at the impact of the pandemic and how you have responded to that as a network. And Caroline will take us through that in a bit more detail as well. So what we'll do in the first instance is just to give you here a bit of a snapshot of the networks that we did survey as part of the 2020 report. What we did see this year, which was quite impressive actually, so the networks that responded in 2020, they have actually grown both in geographical scope, but also in the size of your network membership. So last year, the majority of organizations that responded to the survey were very much focused solely on the London area, whereas this year, the majority of networks, so we had 43% that responded, they were actually global in scope, so their activity extended outside of the UK market. We also saw there an increase in membership. So last year, the average network size was 250 to 500 members. This year, that shifted to 1,000 plus. And what we felt was particularly impressive with this stat is it seems like networks are growing quite significantly in the past 12 months. But what was striking to us was when we looked at the stats around your budgets. So 23% of networks surveyed actually experienced a decrease in budget in 2020, and only 8% were seeing an increase there. And what was really surprising to us is you'll see there that just over half of the respondents, so 53% of organizations, actually had a budget of less than £5,000 to work with in 2020. And when you see the scope of events and initiatives that were run over the last 12 months, it's pretty impressive what you all were able to pull out. And I think the move to virtual, as Caroline's going to touch upon, has certainly helped in that respect. It's allowed us to reach more people in a much more cost-effective way. We also saw across the board that this was very much a year of collaboration, both internally and externally. We saw there that there was continued collaboration with your fellow D&I networks and communities and employee resource groups. And you'll see there the specific networks that were cited most frequently. Unsurprisingly, we saw a really big increase there given the events of the last year around collaboration with your race and ethnicity networks. And perhaps as a reflection of the last 12 months, we also saw networks citing collaboration with family networks and with those dealing with mental health and well-being as well. So that came through quite strongly. We also saw an increase in the number of external organizations that you were also partnering with. And there was a real mix across the board, and we have detailed that within the report, but it included fellow organizations within your sector, charity partners that you were collaborating with, and organizations such as Gender Networks. The final point I'll touch upon here before handing over to Caroline was really around what you define to be your objectives and aims as a network. So we saw an improved level of inclusion being cited there, as well as an increased advancement of women and the actual retention of female talent within your organizations as well. And what we saw coming through in some of the verbatim feedback was a shift from focusing purely on events and workshops for your members to actually getting involved in the processes and policies within your organizations as well. So that's a very high level snapshot of the organizations we surveyed, and Caroline will take us through the response to COVID.
Vanessa, if you want to move on to the next slide. So obviously we couldn't kind of let the year go without having a look at your response to virtualizing your network, which is something we all had to kind of learn very fast kind of this time last year. We know it was something that a lot of you were already looking at technology, and we've asked you about technology in the past and how you've been using that as a network, and this kind of forced all our hands to kind of make this work. As Farah said, you have all run quite a lot of events throughout the year. What we found quite interesting, given the fact that this is now virtual, and a lot of those logistical issues that Snefty referred to earlier, getting rooms booked, getting catering done, getting the audio sorted and all that kind of thing kind of went away. On average, you've run between 1 and 5 virtual events, which we as a firm found quite surprising given the fact that we run 32. And whether that's something that we've just found we've slotted into or what, we're not sure, but we did ask you about those issues of challenging to run those events in the middle of COVID. And you can see there, and we're going to this is probably something a lot of you will touch on, I suspect, is that actually it's not just the issues of getting things out there to your network members. As the people running the networks, you've had your own issues as well. And we can see there at the very top, balancing childcare at home, Zoom fatigue, loss of connection and dialogues, budget freezes, and we've seen already, a fair portion of you, in almost a quarter of you actually had budgets cut, never mind just frozen. And less engagement from network leadership. So there are obviously a lot of challenges out there that maybe we didn't anticipate for a start when we went into this last March. So the top benefits, less logistical issues, more male engagement, and we will talk about that in a moment as well. I know a lot of you were asking Steph about allyship, and we'll touch on that again as well in a moment. Higher attendance numbers, certainly something that we found. It's far easier to get 200 people dialing into an event that is 200 people physically into a room. It's much easier. Lower costs, absolutely, and more intersectionality, and Farah already mentioned the fact that you are all working a lot, and in some cases a lot more, with the other D&I networks within your organisations. Interesting, we saw that 70% of you saw an increase in attendance with the move to virtual, and that's something that I think we've probably seen as well. Slightly worried off the back of that, that means 30% of you didn't see an increase, and in some cases actually saw a decrease in attendance, and that may well be again because of those challenges across there on the right hand side. Obviously 86%, a massive increase in the use of technology to support the network, absolutely kind of goes without saying, but borne out in the stats that you've told us about. And 57% who experienced an increase in male attendance at the virtual events as well, and that's quite a big increase. And I said we'll talk about male inclusion in a moment, but you see there that one thing that we did pull out when Farah and I were discussing the results in the last few weeks, obviously career development is coming to our external speakers. 23% is that's seen as the most valued part of what you can offer to your members. Given the fact that almost a quarter of you have lost budget, and that only 5% feel that internal speakers are valued by the members, it maybe is an area to start looking at for going forward. If that cut in budgets continues for the next year, or freezing budgets, it's a really good way of actually getting bang for your buck. We have used our internal speakers at EY probably more than they wish we did, but we have some amazing speakers, and you probably do within your own organisations, and it may be a good impetus to actually start looking at that in more detail and how those are sold to your membership. But it's certainly an area that could do possibly looking at, given those restraints on budget that we are seeing. Vanessa, if you just want to move over to some of the narrative that we actually had in from you, the members, about what they found about virtualising. There you go. So this is just some of the narrative that the responses we had from it. So you can see what ways have you changed and what topics have you changed and that kind of thing. You can see there's less networking. Obviously, it's quite hard to do in a virtual world, although it'd be quite interesting to see how those little avatars work in the Gender Networks event. I'm quite keen to see how that works. That would be quite good fun. Supporting caregivers at work, informal discussions, community volunteering. A lot of this is looking outside of the community, outside of those social rather than the internal career path. And it's something that we've done as well at EY, and I have to say those topics that we've done that we kind of laughingly call our taboo topics. So things like, we've looked at cancers, we've looked at fertility issues, we've looked at family issues, we've looked at some of those more complicated issues that we maybe wouldn't have done if we'd all been sat in by the room, and those have had far more interest and far more attendance. The innovative things are really quite interesting, and it may even be a push to even be more innovative and more collaborative going forward. Sometimes new podcasts, great way of getting into people that don't have to dial in at the way that you're doing it. They can pick it up anytime. Support groups, film clubs, bite-sized learning with, you know, advocacy programs, fundraising. People have reached out and have flexed their networks to kind of respond to what is going on out there in the wider world, which is really good to see, and it actually seems to be benefiting the networks as well from a lot of the narrative that we've had from you. Moving on, Vanessa, if you can move on to one of the topics that we always seem to ask you about, and it always gets people talking, is engagement with men. And I can't honestly say that we have the magic bullet here. It's amazing to see that the average percentage of networks, male members in your networks is 16%. I think we've been somewhere around 7% in our network. So we have not got this sorted at all. What we have found is we are getting far more men involved in actually attending events, but that isn't at the moment translating into membership sign-ups, which is a real shame. What we do have, what we can see in how men participate in your network, they're acting as allies is the biggest thing, and is actually gone up by quite a lot while attending meetings has not changed that much for you over the last 12 months. Running the network, we've seen an increase in the running of the network to almost 50% of you now have men that engaged in actually running the networks. But then at the bottom, we see in there, they're not, while they may be engaged in helping run the networks, they're not actually seeming to be doing the activity. And, you know, only 33% of you have men engaged with actually developing the programs. And that's maybe an area for concentration going forward. We, on our team, of our SLT team, of our leadership team of 20 odd people, we have 4 or 5 men involved in that team. You know, while we like to think we can all do this on our own, we can't. And we do need the men involved in the planning. You don't want them to take over, that's not the plan, but we do need them involved, and we do need them there to actually give that side and how we can make sure that we are actually appealing to them. One of the areas that we've looked at is the language that is used in our comms and in anything that's going out there, and actually actively going out to men in the business, not just men, women as well, talking about the language that is used in their everyday life. You know, there's always the feedback that we had is, you know, especially our grads and our younger members of the team don't like being sitting there and called girls. But until somebody points it out to you, it's probably not an obvious thing. So those are the kind of areas that we've been concentrating on. It's really good that 67% of you've got increased male involvement there, and that's amazing. Because and 89% feel that you've got male sponsors and champions in the business, and we can't do it without that levels, but there is obviously clearly far more to do. Just one little final interesting stat, and we started asking you about this a few years, is about the name of your networks and whether you would considering a change to a gender neutral name. I know some of you already have gender neutral names, and some of you started with gender neutral names, but some of us still have the women's network or female led titles. And we've seen that, you know, 33% of you with a gender neutral have actually seen an increase, but 67% of you haven't seen that increase. So again, the jury is still out on whether actually having a gender neutral name to your network is actually a way of increasing your engagement. So Vanessa, we can just move on to the last little bit, which is about you the co-chairs, you the people out there that hold it all together and you know, make sure that everything happens. And we're kind of going to talk a little bit to this between myself and Farah. It's interesting that I'm coming to the end of my tenure as co-chair, and I've been doing this for over 3 years. Farah has only joined us in September, so actually Farah and I have never met. We're co-chairs of the largest network at our firm. We've never actually physically met. So, you know, it's an interesting thing to talk about. We can see there that, you know, you're all putting the hard working. I'm not sure the 1 to 2 hours is actually reflective of what you actually do. But what we can see there is that only 40% of you have your role recognised in your performance review. So you're doing this amazing work, but you're not getting the recognition for it. And that is something that absolutely needs to be looked at. If 51% of chairs do not have a defined set of responsibilities or job description, and that's gone up since last year. So there is something going on out there that means you are not getting the and I know we don't do this for recognition, we do this because this is something we care about, but the recognition is also vastly important. And Farah, I'll let you finish off the points on here.
Thanks, Caroline. I'm conscious of time, so I think that the final point I would touch upon the slide, and I think it's also been picked up in the chat, is what we saw was a number of your networks are getting increasing visibility and airtime, both within your organization, but also outside of your organizations. But there's a bit of a disconnect here because you're also experiencing that decrease in your budgets, or they're being frozen. And equally, you're not having your work as a network chair being recognized in things like performance reviews. So it would be wonderful to pick that out in some of the breakout groups around how you've really responded to that as networks.
So thank you so much, Farah and Caroline. As again, these are just highlights that we've picked out in the report. It does concern me that your budgets have gone down. When you've been doing so much, because what we don't want to set is that that's the norm. We can operate within this budget because, when things do return to whatever element of normal, we know that speakers cost money, internal catering costs money. So it is something to keep your eye on. Again, if your work is being cited in your end of year reports, then you should be getting some recognition for that. You run this off the side of your desk through passion. So again, just something to think about. How do we show what we're doing for the network and the impact that that's having across your firm? Now, I'm mindful we don't have 15 minutes to discuss, but I reckon we've got a good 8 minutes. So I'm going to ask Leona to just put you all in some random rooms so that you can have a quick chat with each other. And then I'm going to bring you back with just 2 minutes to spare, but hopefully it gives you a chance to meet other network heads and just think about some of those points. And to Farah's point a moment ago, how are we getting that recognition for what we've got, and also how do we move forward, once, say, we go back to the point where we're let back in offices. So Leona, can I ask you please just to put everyone in a room for 5 minutes, if that's okay? And I'll bring you back in 5. Right, so I think I've got more or less everyone back. So it just leaves me to say thank you so much for joining us. I'm trying to screen share. I don't know why this is not changing. But thank you to everyone for joining us today. Obviously, we've got some links and things like that in the chat group. If you've got any other questions for GN, again, you can always fire them through to Leona. Remember, we're here to help you. International Women's Day, access to reports, white papers, whatever that you need to know in order to shift the needle forward within your organisation. Leona will share the report. Again, let us know if you'd like a LinkedIn group. That seems to be working quite well for the We Are Tech networks, which is the other side of what we do. And again, keep your eye out for some of the things that we're involved in. We'd love your nominations from Rising Stars, just to remind you of that one. And just connect with me on LinkedIn if you're not already, because I'm always sharing bits and bobs on there as well. But a huge thank you to all of our speakers today, to Diane, to Sue, to Harriet, to Stephanie, to Caroline and Farah, and once again to EY for producing that wonderful report that, as I say, I hope you'll all use as a business case to do more. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Keep safe, and we will see you at the next GN, which I believe is in May time, maybe end of April. Leona will have the dates for you. Oh, there we go. It's on the 26th of May. There we go. So we'll see you all then. But remember, we're always here for other things and other questions should you need to ask us. So thanks again. Have a wonderful week. Take care.